A movie about greed, fraud, and stolen money was funded with $100 million in actual stolen money, taken from a fund that was supposed to build schools and hospitals in Malaysia. The man who made it all possible had no title. He just knew the right people, through the right parties, and moved $4.5 billion before anyone figured out what he was doing. His name is Jho Low. He grew up in Penang, went to Harrow in England, then Wharton, and came out the other side knowing exactly how to stand next to powerful people until he looked like one of them. He wasn't some loud executive with a corner office. He was the guy who showed up at the dinner, knew everyone's name, and by the end of the night had somehow become the person connecting a prime minister to a Saudi prince without anyone quite remembering who invited him. Back at Wharton, he was already booking out entire nightclubs for parties and flying classmates to events they had no business attending, building a reputation for being connected long before he had any real reason to be. In 2009, Malaysia launched 1MDB, a sovereign development fund set up under Prime Minister Najib Razak, who also served as finance minister and chaired the fund's advisory board. The idea was national development, energy, real estate, projects that would lift the country. Jho Low helped set the fund up and was regularly consulted on its decisions, but his name never appeared on any official roster. His power came from being Najib's connector, the person who arranged introductions to Middle Eastern royalty and international bankers, structured the deals, and quietly directed where the money flowed through shell companies he controlled from the outside. The first move came that same September, through a joint venture with Petro Saudi. It looked legitimate, which was the point. But according to later DOJ filings, more than $1 billion that was supposed to support that venture got rerouted to an entity called Good Star, beneficially owned by Jho Low. About $1.03 billion pulled sideways, while the paperwork kept wearing a suit and tie. $1 billion gone and nobody called. But now the fund had a hole where its investments were supposed to be, and it needed massive new debt to keep the operation alive. Enter Tim Leissner, Goldman Sachs' chairman for Southeast Asia, who was introduced to Jho Low by his colleague Roger Ng. In 2012 and 2013, Goldman underwrote 3 bond deals for 1MDB worth a combined $6.5 billion. The fees were enormous and around $600 million, far above market rate, and Leissner later admitted he knew where the money was really going and did it anyway. According to U.S. authorities, large portions of those bond proceeds were diverted. This is where it gets almost insulting. Jho Low and his associates set up a company in the British Virgin Islands called Aabar Investments PJS Limited, a name designed to look almost identical to the real Aabar Investments in Abu Dhabi. The difference was a few letters in the legal suffix, and that was enough. About $1.367 billion flowed to that fake entity. Let that sit for a second. $1 billion fraud partly worked because someone copied a company name and nobody checked closely enough to notice. Then comes the third wave, and by now the money barely pretends to be for development. In 2013, about $1.26 billion gets diverted through a shell called Tanora, controlled by Jho Low's associate, Eric Tan. From Tanora, roughly $681 million gets wired through Falcon Bank in Singapore directly into Najib Razak's personal account at Ambank in Kuala Lumpur. Not a government account, not a party fund, a personal bank account belonging to the sitting prime minister. A few months later, $620 million leaves the account and goes right back to Tanora, the same shell it came from. Najib insists the money was a donation from the Saudi royal family, but by then the number is doing all the talking. Meanwhile, Jho Low was turning stolen public money into a lifestyle so loud It should have been its own alarm system. One night in 2012, he walked into a Las Vegas nightclub and ran up a tab that reportedly hit $2 million. Champagne, celebrities, the whole spectacle. He bought a $35 million penthouse in the Time Warner Center in New York. He threw private parties with pop stars, bought paintings worth tens of millions, and even commissioned a $27 million pink diamond necklace for Najib's wife after meeting a jeweler on a chartered yacht in Monaco. And while all of this was happening, actual Malaysians were stuck with the bill. One MDB racked up over $12 billion in debt that taxpayers were on the hook for. Public money turned into private luxury. A retired teacher in Kuala Lumpur paying her taxes was effectively subsidizing Jho Low's nightclub tabs. People protested in the streets wearing yellow, demanding answers, and for a while the government's response was to ban the color. Remember that movie from the top? It was The Wolf of Wall Street. Roughly $100 million traceable to one MDB went into financing it through Red Granite Pictures, co-founded by Najib's stepson, Riza Aziz. Jho Low was reportedly on set, partying with the cast, the man who helped steal the money, hanging out with the people making a film about stealing money. The yacht came too, a super yacht called Equanimity, valued at around $250 million. There were luxury properties, major artworks, and jewelry. Leonardo DiCaprio returned a Picasso, a Basquiat, and Marlon Brando's Oscar that he'd received as gifts once the DOJ filings started peeling everything open. The unraveling starts in 2015, when Sarawak Report and the Wall Street Journal publish reports tying suspicious transfers to Najib's accounts. Once the $681 million figure goes public, this stops being political gossip. Najib tries to contain it. Malaysia's Attorney General clears him. The editor of a major newspaper gets replaced, and the head of an anti-corruption task force gets transferred. But numbers that big don't go away because someone reshuffles the people asking about them. As the investigation spread, Jho Low saw the walls closing in and started moving. First Thailand, then the Middle East, then China. By the time Interpol issued a red notice in 2018, he was already gone. Meanwhile, U.S. kleptocracy investigators were tracing flows through shell companies, bank accounts, and luxury assets. Switzerland, Singapore, and Malaysia all dug in. In 2016, the DOJ filed a massive civil forfeiture action, the largest ever under its kleptocracy initiative, laying out a picture of roughly $4.5 billion misappropriated from one MDB. The political shock lands in 2018. Malaysia's ruling coalition, which had held power for over 60 years, loses the election, and one MDB is one of the biggest reasons why. Within weeks, Najib is barred from leaving the country, and police show up at properties linked to him with trucks. They seize cash, jewelry, and luxury goods worth about $273 million. Among the haul, 567 luxury handbags. The whole thing gets displayed so publicly it looks less like evidence collection and more like a department store having a breakdown. Equanimity gets seized in Indonesia, handed over to Malaysia, and sold in 2019 for $126 million. The single most visible symbol of the scandal, something you could point at and say, yes, that's where the money went. Najib was convicted in 2020 and got 12 years plus a fine of 210 million ringgit, later cut to 6 years in 2024. Tim Leissner, the Goldman banker who made the bond deals happen, faced 25 years and got 2. Roger Ng got 10. Goldman Sachs itself paid more than $2.9 billion to the U.S. and another $3.9 billion to Malaysia, the only criminal case filed against the bank in its 156-year history. And Jho Low? Still a fugitive. Interpol has a red notice with his name on it, but nobody has put handcuffs on him. In 2019, someone reportedly filmed him at Shanghai Disneyland on Christmas Eve, strolling through the park like a tourist. As of 2025, investigative journalists claim he's living in a gated compound in Shanghai under a fake Australian passport with a Greek name. The man who threw $2 million parties in Vegas and bankrolled a movie about financial crime is reportedly still living large, just on the other side of a fence that nobody seems willing to open. Enjoyed this story? Leave a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. Now you know.